What the hell was that? No idea. I didn't ask for sound. So anyway, maybe you didn't hear it. It made this boop thing. Anyway. Distracting. Yes, time for another draft physics video presentation. So we'll do a couple of comments and then I'll try to get back to some bruffy bullshit, but this is just all crap. People state shit, they don't evidence any of the shit, and I have to spend all this time redundantly going over crap that they don't acknowledge why they're rejecting, why it doesn't make sense to them, why that doesn't work. There's just no premises to a conversation. There's no rules. They'll talk about classical mechanics and they'll overtly violate it. And then they'll claim, we're not overtly violating it. When, they're overtly violating it. The momentums aren't the same. It's obviously not conserved. The momentum's not there. It's a different number than it's supposed to be. And they'll say, we didn't violate anything. I mean, it's just so bad. All right, so this Daniel, whatever this is, Assander, well, anyway, as I said in your previous video, oh yeah, that's going to work so well. You just keep saying the same crap that doesn't mean anything. Fine, great, brilliant. So you don't provide any evidence, you don't provide any drawings of your physics, how it works. You have absolutely nothing as a premise, except you play a little bit with math. It's not even much. Well, anyway. I mean, acceleration is not the same thing as velocity. Of course, velocity is the component. Acceleration is the change in your momentum that comes from a change in your velocity. If you change your mass, we won't call that, acceleration unless it changes your velocity. So it's only when your velocity changes when you change your mass. That's the only part that we're counting as acceleration. And obviously it's impossible not to change your velocity by changing your mass. But it's just the velocity portion of your change in momentum. That's it. It's a change in your velocity. And your velocity changes as your momentum changes. Okay. Unless you're just changing your mass. Again, then your velocity can stay the same and you can change your momentum. But anyway, I mean, this isn't worth all this bullshit to say that there's some meaning to your statement, like somehow it's not made of exactly the same thing, that a change in your velocity isn't somehow made out of your velocity. Well, of course a change in your velocity is made out of your velocity. Anyway, even though an acceleration will lead to a velocity, it is a velocity. As it's happening, it's a change in your velocity. It never is anything other than a velocity. An acceleration is always a velocity, and it's just for a certain amount of time that you have that specific velocity. But it's always a velocity. A change in velocity. Let's consider... Fuck you. Whatever. I mean, obviously, and you'll just keep doing this, right? F equals ma, which isn't Newton's equation. So let's just understand the premise is we have to accept this derivation of Newton, which isn't accurate because what Newton actually said is F equals change in momentum. Now, if you want it in units of time, you can put time into it. So Newton said, you want per minute, then put minutes in the bottom. You want hours, how much per hour? Put hours in the bottom. If you want forever, how much change in momentum there was forever, then don't put anything in the bottom. Anyway, equals mass times acceleration. Okay, so we have this concept of acceleration that isn't really Newtonian. All right, so let's move on. Let's say we apply a continuous force. Now, see, he keeps doing it. A continuous force. That means a constant continuous force. That means the same exact force over a period of time. The same exact pressure. So in what case do you have any proof or evidence that any collision is a constant force or a continuous force? Do you understand? Well, you at least acknowledge. You don't acknowledge anything in these comments. I mean, you don't say something, I agree with you that, yes, continuous and constant must be understood to be the same thing in this context. You do understand that it is not just a continuous force, it has to be a constant force. 10 pounds, 10 pounds, 10 pounds, 10 pounds, 10 pounds. Not 10 pounds, 2 pounds, 4 pounds, 7 pounds. No. And again, where does any collision ever demonstrate that the energy is being distributed at exactly the same rate over every millisecond? That the photons are imposing their energy at the same speed that the fender, the whole giant piece of fender moving and hitting something is imparting its force in exactly the same amount of pressure, same amount of force. No, there's no constant force in the equation. Anyway, so we accelerate for 10 seconds. So again, this has so little to do with any of this discussion. I mean, you don't know how it's much of an insult to all of our intelligence. It's not just me. You're insulting the whole audience by talking about, so we accelerate for 10 seconds. What collision takes 10 seconds? I mean, we're talking about milliseconds. And you're playing this game. That there's some constant force, involved when a kinetic ball, when one of Newton's cradle balls hit another ball. Hey, it takes 10 seconds of constant force to transfer its energy. This has nothing to do with the subject. All right. To reach a velocity. So we accelerate for 10 seconds to reach a velocity. But now we want to find out the momentum we have, which is the same thing as all the energy we got from the acceleration. Right. So if we know how many... Again, this isn't that complicated. I just get rid of your idea of time and take total time. I don't need to sit there and force it into units. I don't have to say the force is always under time, in time increments. So, yes, you can describe a force as being 100 pounds per second, or you can just say it's 100 pounds, period. There's 100 pounds of force. That's how much there is, and there's no more. It weighs 100 pounds. It's a volume of weight, and that's it. And that's the same thing as a volume of momentum. You don't need this part, okay, unless you happen to love the idea of saying, how much per second is there? How much per minute is there? How much per hour is there? Well, if you're not interested, then you just have change in momentum. Okay, that's all you have. If you don't care about this, if this is irrelevant, I just want to know what the total force is, okay, over the total amount of time, well, then you don't need this. And you just say, what was the change in the momentum? There, you're done. Where is that incorrect? You won't explain, so what's the point of me asking the question, right? You'll just keep doing this word game. Velocity isn't the same as acceleration, even though it's exactly the same thing, because it's basically as the acceleration is happening, the velocity is changing. All right, anyway. Acceleration is, for example, 1 meter per second. So now they're doing this little per second thing, which really, it's just playing a game where you're saying you're applying the same rate of change, okay, over units of time. So what? How does that make this mystical and different? It doesn't change anything about how much energy is actually going to be transferred between one object and another object. So if you just care about the total energy, you don't need to do all of this crap. And it's certainly, you have nothing, you have no information indicating that you have any certain knowledge that there's any constant or continuous force involved in a transfer of energy between two objects, a collision. You have no evidence that it has anything to do with gravity. Gravity is a constant force applied to objects based proportional to their mass. You have no evidence that every other force, every other interaction in the universe happens by those rules. Zero evidence of that, and there's a ton of counter evidence. In just the logic I've explained before about how the energy from a nuclear bomb doesn't hit you with any constancy. You can actually see it in the images of the people watching the nuclear bomb. You can see that they go, things wave, things change. The acceleration, the momentum that's being transferred to them isn't constant. Okay. Um, but velocity is just meters per second. So, so this is just a silly game. Yes, that's how you're looking at it. But I could break it down into meters per second per second. So simply. So what sense are you arguing from? There's no sense here. While acceleration is meters per second per second. So of course we have the square it right. So of course we have to square it, right? Of course not. It's just units of time. Why does that give you an excuse to quadruple the amount of energy in something merely because you're saying it's a constant force over a projected time that I invented? I'm saying it happened over many, many seconds when you have no evidence it happened over in many, many seconds. You're not putting that into the equation, honestly. And the fact is that that's not really happening. I don't know how to. I mean, I don't know how to. There's no graphical way to play this game with these people where they could just add per second, per second, per second. They're going to add another per second, per second, per second, per second, per second. Per minute, per hour, per. And they're just looking at one thing. So I'm just saying, again, the simple way to understand momentum is all it is an area created by two things, mass and velocity. And the truth of it is that the mass is the foundation thing, the velocity has to be on. So the basic premise is you could just break it into units. You could just you could just quantize it and understand it. It's in a volume of something. And it's basically a volume of, you can understand that if I have one electron going 1,000 miles an hour, that's the same as having two electrons going 500 miles an hour. And it's the same as having three electrons going to 333 miles an hour. I mean, that's all it is. It isn't anything more complicated than that. And now you're just playing some game. So when the energy is going in, you're saying you have some excuse to square a velocity. That you have some excuse to say you have the mass this way and you have your velocity vector this way. And instead of just having the velocity vector, you're going to make the velocity vector keep going. Okay, way out here. Okay, give it more and more and more. This tremendous amount of extra energy. So the real momentum says you have this much. And you're just going to keep projecting this much by squaring velocity. So anytime it's misshapen a little tiny bit, so say if I have a little mass and a big velocity, you're going to keep amplifying the velocity portion as if it means something more when it can't mean anything more. It can't mean anything more. All right, so I don't really know how to illustrate the per second thing. And why it gives you an excuse to to take the velocity and multiply it times itself. And again, it might in some perverse way make sense in gravity, but there's no evidence that any of these collisions are a constant force at a constant rate. Continuous. None of them. And obviously continuous doesn't mean much when it's continuous only for a short period of time. So what does that even mean? So the idea is that gravity is a constant force that hits an object based on how big it is. So it's just buckets. Okay, if you're a little bucket, you don't collect much. If you're a big bucket, you collect lots of the rain. So it gives you, proportional to your mass, an amount of force. It gives you more force if you're big and less force if you're small. So when you hit the ground, if you're big and you travel the same distance, you were in the gravity the same amount of time, the big thing has a lot more quanta of energy than the little thing because it had less time to collect the rain, the volume. And he's just saying, okay, this rate that you're falling is constant because the falling, this stuff, the rain is constant. Okay, and there's a certain number of seconds, okay, that you're in it. And he says there's some reason why you should assume your velocity is increasing exponentially when it doesn't. We already know it doesn't increase. It doesn't even increase as you would think it does. I have to go 4 times higher to make twice the velocity. So how does 4 times higher to double my velocity indicate velocity times velocity? That indicates almost the opposite. that I'm somehow doing less than, velocity times some sort of degrade, because I clearly am not getting, I'm not getting 2x the velocity for 2x the height. So that's obviously not indicating I have some reason to square one rate times another rate. But whatever. There's no way to say it. Velocity, saying velocity squared for the rate doesn't mean, see how to say it. When they say 1 meter per second, that doesn't mean velocity squared. That's just a shorthand of writing it. But it clearly doesn't mean you're just squaring the velocity, that you're just doing velocity times velocity. 1 meter per second just means you're putting a certain amount in, and you're doing it per second. And that's it. You have numerous seconds where you're putting a certain amount in, but that doesn't mean you're putting in anything proportional or the same amount, because obviously it doesn't even work. I mean, 4 times the height, 2 times the velocity. Obviously it's not putting 4 times in. So it doesn't even work. Well, point. So he just ignored the paradoxes created, ignored the fact that they has no experimental evidence, and just keeps wishing to reclaim this thing. Ignores the fact that the numbers never add up. Momentum says one, like I said, they do in one circumstance, you'll get the same number for kinetic energy as momentum. But 99% of the time, they say something fundamentally different about the universe. And if you use one or you use the other to navigate in space, you will not land in the same location. They are not in any way the same thing or compatible or any of that bullshit. They have very different descriptions of the mechanical universe. And he just keeps denying that. Alright, so the replies to, let's see which one. Yeah, here they are. Okay, so Richie says, this is where I left off the last time. They added this extra bits of crap. And I think the Lancaster guy chimes in somewhere here too. Or whatever his name is, sorry. Yeah, there he is. Alright, so let's do this again. Alright, so Richie says he's looking for a theory that says it's okay to destroy conservation of momentum, if such a theory exists. Now, there's clearly, in Bro's experiment, there's absolutely no doubt momentum was not conserved. There's no explanation that the spring destroyed the energy through heat or deformation or some kind of magical, the energy went somewhere. It's clearly saying there's just no momentum. It just doesn't happen. You don't get the doubling of the momentum. Okay, to conserve kinetic energy, you have to destroy the momentum. It's a clear fact. And this idiot says, no one is saying conservation of momentum doesn't work. Of course you're saying it. You're overtly saying it. It's just amazing. I mean, how can you write this crap? So this is probably just a troll. I don't know. What's the point? I repeat again and again, no one is disputing conservation of momentum. You clearly had an experiment showing it overtly happening. How can you say, no one's saying that happened? Clearly, one object leaves with less momentum than the other object from a device that's already been proven it gives the momentum back. You don't have a single experiment demonstrating the spring can't deliver the same momentum back. So why didn't it deliver the momentum? And you're not going to answer that question, clearly. All right. There is no theory without conservation of momentum, and implying otherwise is a lie. So it's clearly not a lie. Springs conserve energy, whatever that is. That is a fact. And if you measure energy as momentum, it clearly loses it. So there's just no point in you saying this drivel. Well, listen to his vids. He says it creates a free energy paradox. Why is he wrong? And then JPG also says, well, here are Draft's own words. KE theory is not compatible with momentum theory. When you try to keep both of them in your universe, you end up with either a free momentum formula or a free kinetic energy formula. They both create paradoxical circumstances where I can just... And... let's see, I can just keep generating more and more momentum or more and more kinetic energy. If we accept the 1.4, we create free momentum. So it's clearly the what you first in one direction, okay? So you're so in the case where you take the slow thing, okay, and replace it with a small thing, you lose momentum. Okay, perpetually. So if I keep going smaller and smaller and smaller, the momentum starts degrading preposterously. I'm losing 0.6 of the increase each time, so I'm getting less and less and less and less. And if I go the other way, I'm doing exactly the opposite. I'm gaining, okay, a third of the momentum with each adventure. All right, anyway. We create free momentum. If we accept the two, we make free kinetic energy. Where is he getting it wrong? So they won't answer that, of course. And so then this guy just repeats the same shit he put in the other comments. So here we go again. Because acceleration and velocity is not the same thing. They are very different things. So now he says they're very different things. So somehow a change in your velocity is a very different thing than velocity. And the only reason why your velocity is changing is because either a force added some velocity or you change the mass. So we know in all of these circumstances the mass isn't being changed, so clearly the velocity doesn't have to change. So the only thing changing the velocity is something through the process of the interaction. One thing hits another thing and has to exchange the velocity. It can't exchange mass, it can only exchange velocity. And somehow he's saying that direct exchange of velocity is somehow not related to velocity. Oh, I think it is. Anyway, consider driving your car. Well, this ought to be funny. First, you accelerate to a certain speed. This takes time, but now you have reached the velocity, which is your speed. So again, he's saying that the little game of acceleration, progressive constant acceleration, same exact speed acceleration, gaining the same amount of velocity acceleration, is, just like gravity. He's saying all other circumstances where acceleration takes place are happening with continuous constant forces, which they're not, quite obviously. And all of the circumstances we're talking about in terms of collisions and springs and explosions don't have anything to do with any idea that it's a constant force. Okay, we can all agree on this, right? Acceleration takes time, which comes out at F equals ma. So he keeps doing it. They keep doing the F equals ma thing when Newton's formula is force equals change in momentum over whatever unit of time you care to measure. And if you don't care to measure any unit of time, then it's just total force equals total change in momentum. Because force is just momentum. And that's what the spring shows you. The spring is basically saying, put the force in, I'll give you the force back out. Put the momentum in, put the weight in, and I'll give you the same weight pressure back out. Force equals mass times acceleration. So just more mush about how acceleration is something other than just a change in your velocity. And your velocity only changes because you either change your mass or you change your speed. So you get pushed by something. A force. Okay, if we want to find out the momentum, we can just use mass times velocity. This is just baby talk, because velocity is something different from acceleration. So he just keeps saying it, even though acceleration is completely made out of velocity. Changes in velocity. And momentum is just change in your total volume. That is the mass. How many electrons do you have and how fast are they moving? So there's no diagram for this physics, there's no explanation for it, and again, they just keep ignoring the obvious paradox. The obvious one. that if fast things can't go equally fast from the same force, then it works the other way around, where slow things will go faster. They'll have to gain energy. If you're going to lose energy one direction, you're going to have to gain energy in the other direction. And that's a paradox. That's free energy. And I think somebody would have discovered if it actually exists. So there's got to be a reason why it doesn't. All right, I don't think there's anything else here that needs attention. Okay, that's the it's BS bullshit. And that's his comment. And there's no replies to that. So, yeah, that's it. All right, so maybe I'll do some Stephen Bro shit. I did think of another point to raise that, I think it's really which thing you would, it's where he attached the spring is the problem. But the other issue that, is important, as I've pointed out before, if your spring isn't stiff enough, it doesn't have very much velocity. So if you think of a slinky, slinkies are really unstiff springs. Right, they move really slowly. They can, if you stretch them, they pull back pretty slow. You can't really compress one substantially, but if you compress it and let it go, it moves slowly. It's a weak spring. So the velocity of that spring is really important in terms of if you're going to be pushing things with the spring. It has to have a maximum velocity that's high enough to achieve the velocity you're trying to impose. So if the spring itself isn't stiff enough to produce this quick velocity, and that's the other thing to think about, is like car springs and stuff are very responsive because it's a very stiff spring. It moves very quickly. It responds to changes very quickly. So if you're going to be moving objects at variable speeds or speeds that have any significance, you need a stiff enough spring, a spring that can expand quick enough to be able to push the object. If the spring expands slowly, you can understand I can't make the spring push something faster than the spring can move. If the spring doesn't move as fast as the thing you're trying to move, obviously it's going to fail to give you the higher velocity. So that might be the reason why in his experiment he didn't achieve the twice the velocity, is because he's exceeded the tolerances of the spring. His spring isn't stiff enough to deliver the energy quickly enough. So if he used a different spring, he would have got a different result, is the simple argument. And, springs all have these different advantages. There's advantages to stiffness, and then there's, in other cases, there's advantages to being able to stretch them a long way. And you have to understand the advantages and disadvantages and understand that each spring has a range of function, where you can put a certain amount of energy. Some of them are, you can't put too much energy in or it's destroyed. Others you can't put in too quick or it's destroyed. So there's rules for springs, and there's no evidence that Stephen paid any attention to those rules or that he tried doing the experiment with springs of different tension, or that he ever in some way tested the spring to see what its tolerances were. I would imagine the way they test springs is actually putting variable weights on them. I think that's actually how they would test a spring. Let's understand, if Stephen's right, scales shouldn't work. Lots of things shouldn't happen in the universe if its experiment is the truth, and it actually is true that springs lose this energy, lose the capacity to return the momentum. Because you can understand that a scale has to measure a range of weights, and it has to do it based on compression. And the same compression, you can't have two different momentums, two different weights, compress the spring the same amount. That's essentially what he's saying, is that I can manufacture a weight, and I can have two momentums that are different, and I can hit the spring with those two different momentums, and it'll compress the same amount. Not possible. All right. But as usual, don't pay any attention to the arguments I just made and just keep preaching your F equals ma crap that doesn't mean a damn thing. It's just a contrivance, and it's a complete bastardization. It's a complete perversion of Newton's statement. Newton's statement wasn't F equals ma. Newton's statement was F equals a change in your momentum. Essentially meaning F per second, or F over a total time, will always equal a change in your momentum. Change in force, change in momentum, equal sign. That's all it is. Force is momentum, is energy. And they won't be able to dispute that with any kind of reasoning at all. They won't show an experiment where that isn't true. Because it's always true. It's the way the physical universe works. And this argument shouldn't even have to happen between intelligent people. But apparently that's not the planet we live on. We don't live on the planet of intelligent people. Alright, so I'll be back. Alright, I'm back. So I'll have to see if that sound is on the video. That sound notifications is somehow turned on, and so it tells me when I'm paused or not paused with a tone. So anyway, probably a good feature actually, but it's just sort of annoying. It's probably a pain in the ass to change the tone, so anyway, so we have a 48-second, no doubt, piece of crap, useless crap video here, so we might as well play it and see what the point is. Right, so Steven thinks he's the victim here, right? Now, I've only made videos referencing little Bruffy in response to Bruffy's accusations, right? I haven't made any video on purpose poning or in some way showing how Bruffy is a stupid moron. I've only responded to his lies. That's it. So any reference to Bruffy in any of my videos is just a reference to an assertion being made by little Bruffer. And I have to defend myself against the lie. He's lying when he says I owe him something, or I promised him anything, or any of this other crap. And I would certainly defend my physics against his loop-de-doo, nonsensical rubbish. Okay. Alright, so this is in some way we're supposed to be arguing. I don't know. We're supposed to exchange this kind of crap. So I'm trying to solicit a conversation about physics, and what are they providing? Just recognize the truth here, okay? I'm just saying. I mean, even an unfair cop would have to concede 90% of my videos are discussing mechanics. I'm supposed to just integrate into the turd Borg?
Is this a turd Borg, or another one of your childish drawings? It's hard to tell. Could this be a turd Borg?
Alright, so he doesn't draw anything. So I'm drawing the actual physical universe in motion. Frankly, this is pretty good considering it's the actual physical universe in motion. And, you know, I can't make the lines auto-delete. Okay, so it's like I can't draw on a chalkboard and have the line automatically delete as the chalk moves and then just keep the important parts or something. It's just the liability of showing the universe in action is that, yes, the drawing gets stuff on top of other stuff, but that's why they invented like dotted lines and different things, is so you could tell the difference between the then and the now and all that kind of crap. So if you watch the drawing progress, you'll understand it. You look at it as the end product, well, maybe it doesn't look too good. And the same trues with all that math they put on the board behind the Einstein or something. Does it look like it's anything? Well, it is something if you follow along. But it really isn't anything as a collection. But play your game. This is just so fucking petty.
Just another one of Gary's crappy pseudo-scientific pieces.
So another one of his accusations that there's something pseudoscience. So I've had 3 videos on my website for months now requesting if you have a counter argument, just show something in those videos that you claim is not possible, that's not consistent with the physical evidence that exists. And they won't do that.
It's scribble. Or is this a turd Borg, perhaps? He looks very proud of it anyway. Look, Mom, look what I've drawn. A turd.
So this is something, this is meaningful to the conversation. This is how you are winning the argument about why there's kinetic energy is because you're claiming this drawing isn't any good. When I could show Faraday's drawings. Okay, Faraday did a lot of drawings, okay? I mean, Faraday was a good scientist. He wanted to know how it worked, and he tried all kinds of things. He tried all kinds of drawings. So I could even show you Leibniz drawings. And, you know, his scribbles on his paper. And that's what they are. Sometimes they're images of himself. Sometimes he's doodling. And they look like that. And so, you know, what? So anybody who attempts to draw a mechanical system in motion is, in your opinion, pseudoscience. Oh, brilliant theory.
Keep away, don't integrate into the, keep away from his son, don't get integrated into the turd, Bob.
So he's doing all this in defense of a conventional physics that hasn't repeated the Eddington experiment, doesn't have any kinetic energy experiments in their file. So for 300 years they say something exists, and they have compiled no evidence to show it to you. None. No experimental evidence to show to you. None. And he's saying that's not a Borg. No, that's a religion. They're just telling you what the truth is. They're not showing you the truth. He's just saying all this crap in defense of science that is so fucking sloppy. He tried to duplicate Madame Chatelet's great clay experiments, and he couldn't do it. But he thinks that's great science. It's great science when the results don't come out the same. This is just too... yeah. This is too stupid.
Get integrated into the turd, Bob. Yes, boys and girls, learn from Gary. Avoid the turd bug at all costs and way matters. Yes, boys and girls, learn.
All right, so this is what it takes, right? So you can't make a physics argument. You have to do whatever this is.
Gary, avoid the turd bug at all costs and way matters.
And it's just so funny. I mean, this guy's living in the glassest of houses. I mean, his house is so glass. And he's throwing these kinds of stones. Like somebody couldn't buffoon the fuck out of this turd, right? I mean, he's so vulnerable to being just, you know, literally just ripped apart as a silly, dopey, okay, sloppy, messy, smelly. Doesn't matter where you go. You can go in all directions and make a joke out of this asshole. And here he is playing this game. I mean, man. He's just lucky. I have no interest in, you know, making something that's already obvious more obvious. If people don't like, you know, physics drawings, if they don't understand them, okay, fine. They don't like them. I'm just saying there's no other way to do it, frankly. You know, there really isn't. There's no other way to draw the sequence of events than to draw them on top of each other. And so unless you understand the layers, yeah, you're not going to understand the drawing. But this is just too stupid. All right, so that was just such a waste of... I mean, whose time could that not have been a waste of? I mean, who has time that's so invaluable that he didn't just waste it? Waste a piece of their life. Ugh. So, more kinetic energy for dummies. RMS math. Well, who cares about your little English math crap? But go ahead. Play the game.
Okay, so just a crude demonstration. So, just a basic demonstration to show that this has low friction. Okay.
So let's see. What he's also demonstrating is that springs conserve momentum really well. There's just no denying it. The spring is actually producing the momentum. It's coming out of the spring each time. The same momentum in, the same momentum out. Very low losses. So he's actually demonstrating the very point. But what he's not demonstrating is that I tried different springs. Yeah, that's what he's not demonstrating. So, yeah, okay, we got it. Good test. Thank you. That's the kind of test should have been in the video. It would have been a nice add-on. Again, I made no direct accusation that the cart wasn't efficient. I just stated we don't know how efficient it is. That's all I stated. And the fact is, it does weigh a lot. Okay, it weighs 3-4 pounds, maybe 5 pounds, 2 kilograms. I think it's like 5 pounds. So it's not very light. So the spring that has to push it has to be able to push something heavy, fast. A question worth asking.
Yeah, I think it was about 15 or so. Try again.
Okay, well, we don't need you to try again because it's such a simple experiment. So he's going to waste our time doing the same experiment over and over again, which nobody really requested. All right, so let's just stop somewhere in here. You know, my wasted time.
13, 14, 15.
Dun, 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 dun.
So,
Let's go to here. So this is interesting, the weighted one. So it's twice as heavy. So it went from 2 kilograms or 5 pounds to 10 pounds.
10, almost 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Okay, well, whatever. This is unnecessary, but let's just see what he's. Oh well, he's going to talk, so let's let him say his piece.
11 versus 15. I'm sure somebody who's good at mathematics can work something out from that about the ratio when we've doubled the mass.
The point would be is that obviously it affected the durability because you got less distance out of it because it's more mass. So obviously friction took the velocity quicker from the heavy car than from the fast car. But it's not that significant. I'm not going to argue that that difference in friction created the difference in the two carts moving. The weight difference, well, anyway, continue.
I'm guessing it's that 0.707 thing, isn't it now? I'm guessing that's going to work out at 0.707 of the speed, the velocity rather, when it was half this mass. I'm guessing. Do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just about 11. 1, 2, 3.
So he's doing all this over and over, and what he really would be interesting too is just measure the velocity. But, you know, whatever.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, he just keeps doing the same thing.
11. Yeah, okay. 11 versus 15. I'm quite surprised to find out that that 0.707 thing actually worked out quite well. So there clearly is an RMS type, root mean square type relationship between the ratios of these two different test runs carrying two different masses. I don't know why though, because I'm no good at mathematics, I'm in no position to explain it all. But it is a kind of an instinctive thing, isn't it, really, that this RMS value, the root mean squared, it's the same with electricity.
The mean squared, I don't know what you said, right? Something squared. Same in electricity. I don't know.
It's not the average value, is it? It's the root mean squared value. Interesting though, isn't it? It follows this law quite precisely, as far as we can determine. So I've just done the calculation, divided 15.5 because the trolley always ends up half. It's always 15 and a half feet, isn't it? So I've divided 15.5 because the trolley always ends up halfway across on the 15th run, after the 15th run. Then divided by 11, and that works out to 0.709. I'm quite surprised how close that is to 0.707, the RMS.
Yeah, it's also 666 is also close. So whatever. Again, Professor Lewin's experiment is 1/3. So 1/3 versus whatever. I mean, it's within a range where you're saying who knows what you're really detecting, because you're not doing anything precise enough to say you don't have enough variables. They're just changing the amount a little tiny bit.
I think the root mean squared value. I wish I knew the mathematics, to be honest. Too late in life for me to take on all that, really, to be honest. I should have learned it when I was a kid, and I didn't. I think that's Gary's downfall, the same as me, really.
Whatever. No, I don't have any downfall. Okay, there's no downfall. The theory's getting better and better and better and better at describing the reality, and the proof of that is not one of you gutless turds has been able to even touch the 3 videos I'm requesting you to, in some way, debunk.
I think people who are good at mathematics tend to have an easy time of comprehending all these relationships.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, they tend to make shit up that doesn't mean anything, like Feynman. So do you think the same electron did everything in the universe forever? One electron, because the math says it's possible?
To me, it comes as a bit of a surprise. It's a new thing for me. I'm learning as I go, but there's a limit time which I want to learn about this subject. I'm only really getting into this really just to challenge Gary's nonsense. That's the only reason I'm doing this. I'm not reading it.
Yeah. So that's exactly what everybody's known from the beginning. Okay, everybody rational is you're only doing this because you're a petty weasel trying to prove me wrong rather than to find the truth. And that's the right answer. That's why you were all sad when your clay experiment didn't work out. It didn't work. I can't say he's wrong again because I'm wrong this time.
Interested in the laws of mechanics. It's not really my fascination. It's interesting up to a point.
So the laws of mechanics are not really his fascination. Some other thing is. I guess I just wonder what in physics would be the law of mechanics. Isn't the interesting part of physics? I guess the God part is more interesting to you, huh? Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to make a study of it. I don't want to sit there for hours, doing exercises. Should we do the calculation just to show you? So 11. It was pretty much exactly 11, wasn't it?
Yes, and let's understand. I've already done the drawing for the paradox. The paradox. How do you escape the paradox you're creating? You're saying the spring conditionally doesn't work with a special condition. Okay, the special condition says the spring doesn't work. It doesn't weigh. It weighs 2 things of different momentums, 2 things of different weights, and it gives you the same reading on the scale. So I put a duck on and an elephant on, and somehow it says it weighs the same. How can it do that?
The number of runs between these 2 points, when it was 4 kilograms total weight, total mass, divided by 15.5, because that was almost.
So again, just more. You don't know any theory to defend it, but you're going to show us you punching it into the calculator because it's so important. Yeah, okay.
Always. The result when it was 2 kilograms.
Alright, well, this was also a waste of time.
I've already done it monthly, yeah. Yeah, 0.7096. That's lovely and close to 0.707. I'm quite pleased about that. I don't know why, but there you go.
707. I don't know. It's close to. I don't know. 709. Oh, he's going to significant digits that he couldn't have possibly measured. Oh, I see. Okay. Anyway. Whatever. Continuing. And such. Just saying logically there's an explanation. There has to be an explanation. Okay, this can't be the first time it was discovered that springs don't conserve momentum. Okay, if it's true that they don't, it had to be realized by somebody else some other time in history. And the real fact is that the spring isn't capable of delivering the velocity because it's too soft a spring. So, or the fact that, again, he has the springs attached to the vehicle is in some way making a difference. I'm trying to think of what happens when you go into the object. It just, it would just be interesting to see if it makes any difference if the springs are attached to the surfaces rather than attached to the vehicle. But either way, I mean, it can't be ignored that why isn't there evidence of this? If this was a real thing that happened, that springs don't work, why wouldn't we see that they don't work? Yeah, because it's a paradox, and it's a free energy paradox to boot. But anyway, it doesn't, we're always stuck with stuff. Like I said, I'll go back to the Professor Lewin video that's so strange, where he's actually making extra momentum, free energy, free momentum. And there has to be an explanation. We should all agree there has to be an explanation. So why are we pretending that we actually do believe that the free energy thing was right there in front of us all this time and we didn't know it? It's so simple, right? Just put a light thing and then a little bit heavier thing, twice as heavy, and then twice as heavy as that, and then twice as heavy as that, and twice as heavy as that. And all I have to do is put energy in here, and I'll get 3 times the energy out here. I mean, we'd all have one if it worked. Wouldn't we? I mean, come on. It's easier than inventing airplanes, right? Inventing that seems like somebody should have invented that by now. The free energy box or whatever. Because it only, it has such simple parts in it. It just has, weights with springs between them. I mean, wouldn't everybody have one? Okay. Anyway. That's enough for the video. I guess there's nothing else to say. Goody did this experiment. Goody demonstrated how the cart does maintain its momentum, but like I said, he also demonstrated that the spring is a reliable collector of the energy and a transmitter of the energy. So why didn't the spring produce twice the energy? How did it break the momentum? How did you destroy conservation of momentum? It's quite clear the springs are conserving the momentum. When the car is going back and forth, it's quite clear it's conserving the momentum. So why does it stop conserving it? Merely because does the spring read our mind and know that we changed the weight on the object? How does it do that? Anyway. So till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Yeah, that's enough. So this has been the DraftPhysics.com video presentation and such.